Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel. In today's Java Basics video, we will start to talk about arrays in Java programming, which is a very important and useful component that we can use to store list-like data in Java. So without further ado, let's get started. Today's lesson is about Java arrays. And before we start talking about this, let's first take a moment to think about data. The data types that we have discussed so far in this course have mostly all been able to store only one value. So an int, for example, can store one integer. A Boolean can store one true or false value. A double can store one decimal number. The one data type that is a slight exception is the string data type, which is actually, there is no defined length of how many characters a string can store, and a string can be as long or as short as we want it to be. You can kind of view a string as a collection of characters, a list of characters put together as one. Another data type that stores a list, a collection of data in Java, is the array data type. An array is essentially a list of values. For instance, we can store a list of tasks, a list of prices, or a list of booleans in one Java array as a collection. Now let's talk about making arrays in Java. So to declare an array in Java is slightly different from declaring what are known as the primitive data types that we have learned before. There isn't one data type keyword array that we can use. Instead, the declared type will be dependent upon the type of data that will be put into the array. So following that data type, we will write a pair of square brackets. Let's take a look at how we can declare an array of strings called myArray. So what we can do is we can write, first of all, the data type of the values that will be put into this array, which is strings, since we want to have an array of strings. So we write string. And then we put a pair of square brackets. Following that, we put a space before the name of the variable name. So we want to call our array myArray. So that's the name that we'll put right here. And then don't forget the semicolon. And just like that, we can also declare an array of booleans like this. So boolean, and then a pair of square brackets, followed by the variable name array of booleans, semicolon. Just to show you that this is not actually going to raise any errors when I run this program, I'm going to just simply put this into our online Java editor and run it. It shouldn't give us any outputs, and it should not throw any errors either, which it didn't. So that's good. We know that this is how we can declare arrays in Java. And this idea also applies to other data types, so int and doubles and so on. Now on to the initialization of arrays. An array in Java is written as a comma-separated list of values inside of curly brackets. Here are some examples. So here we declare a string array called tasks. And you can see it's going to store strings. So this is how we declare it. And then on the same line, what we can do is we can write, we want this array to be equal to this thing. And you can see we have a starting curly bracket and an ending curly bracket. Inside, we have a comma-separated list of values. This is one value. Learn programming. It's a string. And then comma. And then another value, read, which is also a string. This has to match the data type of how the array was initially declared, what data type it's designed to store. So in this case, tasks is declared to store strings, so we can only put strings inside of this array. So learn programming, read, comma, do chores, comma, stay alive. And then we have a semicolon at the end of this line. Same thing with our int and Boolean arrays. For the int array, it's called prices. It stores 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it stores the values of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. For the Boolean array, random array, it stores the values of true, false, false, and true. So I can copy these three lines into our online Java editor. And let's just take a look at what will happen, which nothing should happen when I run this program. Let's see if that's true. So there is no error thrown. That's good. So we know that this is how we can initialize arrays in Java programming. And there's also another way of declaring arrays if you don't know what values the array will take. So when we make arrays like this, we know exactly what values we want to put inside of our tasks, in this case, the tasks variable. When we make this array, we can put those values inside of tasks as soon as we make this array. And sometimes we don't know what values the array will take, but we want to initialize it nonetheless. So this is how we can make such an array. So we write int, square brackets, and then variable name. This is the same as was above, like this, right? And then we write is equal to new. This is going to make a new instance of the int array, and the number we put inside here, the 2, is saying that we want to allocate memory in our computer for 2 integers. So this array is designed to store 2 ints. And there are also some other examples of using this syntax for making arrays. So double D array is equal to new double array storing 5 doubles. Same thing with this string array storing 3 values, this Boolean array storing 3 values as well. So let me just copy these 3 lines into our program again. So running this program, we should also see nothing printed out. That means that there is no error thrown and everything is successfully compiled and run. After we initialize an array with default values, we can actually modify the values using indexing. So the way how we make arrays in here, there are actually default values inserted into these arrays. For instance, when we make this int array, it will actually be an array of 2 numbers, and both numbers will be 0. So we can modify these values using indexing. And we can also do the same to arrays we make like this. We can also make this, for example, false, or we can make this 7, or we can make this hello world. We can do this using indexing. And indexing is accessing a specific element in an array, and we access elements using their indices. Singular is index. So indexing in programming is slightly different than how we usually count in life. We count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The first element is number 1, the second element is number 2, and so on. Now, in many programming languages like Java, the index of the first element in an array is actually not 1, but 0. The second element has an index of 1. So everything starts with 0. Here is an example array. We see the elements of Java, Ruby, Dart, and Go, 4 programming languages, in one array. Index 0 is going to be Java. Index 1 will be Ruby. Index 2 now will be Dart, and index 3 will be Go. Let's take a look at this in Java code. So here we have made a string array called programming languages, and it will store strings, and it stores the values of Java, Ruby, Dart, and Go. So when we print out programming languages 0, notice the syntax here. So we write the array, and then we put inside of square brackets immediately following this array name. In square brackets, we put the index. So in this case, we want to access the value inside of programming languages whose index is 0. So that's going to be Java. And here, we're accessing the value inside this array whose index is 1. So that's going to be Ruby. So if I run this code inside of our online Java editor, let me just real quick delete all of this, and let me just run this program, we should see Java, Ruby, Dart, and Go printed out. So we can see that this has index 0, Ruby has index of 1, Dart has index 2, and Go has index of 3. In addition to accessing the elements of an array, we can also use indexing to modify elements of an array. So we can print out elements of an array using indexing. We can also change these elements using indexing. So same array as above, we print out the first element of, or 0 index, so that's the first element. The index is 0. So we print out the 0 index of our array, and then using indexing, we change the element at index 0 to JavaScript. So that's going to modify this thing right here. It's going to change Java to JavaScript. And then now if we print out programming languages 0, we will get JavaScript instead of Java. So let's take a look at what will happen if I just run the code here. Running this program, we should see Java printed out. So this is going to be the output of line 4. So we get Java. And then after we change programming languages 0 to become JavaScript, now if we print it out, we get JavaScript. And arrays in Java have a property called length, which is the size of the array, the number of elements that it has. We can access this value using array.length. And so instead of writing array, we want to write the actual name of our array. So in this case, it might be programming languages, or if we made an array called array, we can just write array.length. So in this program, we can see those 2 lines of code. If I paste this into our editor, we should see array.length equals to 4. So we should see 4 printed out right here. So this is saying that this array right here has a length of 4. It has 4 elements inside of it. So now we want to take a look at how we can loop over arrays. So if we want to print out all the elements of an array, we can do so using a for loop or a while loop, but let's just take a look at how we can do so using a for loop for now. So we have a string array called devices. Inside of it we store 5 strings: computer, phone, printer, speaker, and monitor. So how can we print these values out? Well, we can access these values using their indices. So we can access this using the index of 1. This has index of, this has index of 0. This has index of 1, 2, 3, and 4. So how can we make a for loop with the loop control variable equal to 1, 2, what am I thinking? 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Well, we can do so by first making our loop control variable I equals to 0. And while this control variable is less than the length of our array, we want to increment it. Since the length of our array is 1 bigger than the last index. So we have a length of 5, while the last index is 4. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So while I is less than 5, that means that the maximum value that I will be inside of this line will be 4. So I will be 0, and then we go up 1, 2, 3, 4. And then after it goes to 5, this is no longer true, so we don't print out devices at index 5. So if we run this program, let's take a look at our output. 1 second. Running this, we should see computer, phone, printer, speaker, and monitor printed out. So the 5 values of our array. So this is a general syntax for how we can iterate through an array using a for loop. So int something is equal to 0, and I here you can think of it as it stands for the index. So the index will be equal to 0. While it's less than the length of our array, we'll increment it by 1. And then we print out the element of that array at the index I. Now let's practice. Make an array that stores at least 5 values. And then use indexing to grab the second value from the array. I'm talking about the second value, so index will be 1 from the array. And then print it out. And then use indexing to change the 4th value of the array. And use a for loop to print out the values of the array. There's so many ways of how you can do this, so take a few moments to try this out on your own, and hopefully you were able to get something like the program right here. So we have an integer array called int, which is equal to, in curly brackets, 314159. And then we print out int at index 1. This is printing out the second value of the array. We print it out. And then we change the fourth value of the index. Because the index is always going to be one less than, the first, second, third, the normal counting of the value. So fourth value will be index of 3. So we change the fourth value at index 3 to be equal to 7. And then we use a for loop to print out the values of our array. So int I is equal to 0, I less than int.length, I plus plus. And then we print out int at the index of I. Let me just copy this code and paste it inside of our editor. Running this code, we should see. So let's take a look at what happens. We first print out 1. So 1 is going to be this line right here. So int at index 1 will be the 1 right here. So after 3, this is index 0, this is index 1. So we get this right here. And then we change the index 3 of our array to be equal to 7. So 0, 1, 2, 3. So the second one of the array will be changed to 7. And when we run this for loop, we can see that indeed 3, 1, 4, and then we followed by 7 before 5 and 9. Arrays is a very useful component of Java programming, and it can be used to store a variety of different list-like data. And that's it for this video about arrays in Java programming. If you found this video helpful, please consider subscribing to our team channel down below. And with that said, thank you for watching, and we hope to see you in future videos.